Good morning. Welcome to the Centrum, welcome to chapel this morning. We are rounding out the final day of our Symposium chapel series. And so all week this week, we have been engaging and exploring religious traditions in China. And so this morning, we finish our exploration with Pureland Buddhism. Many thanks to Dr. Mako's Religions of India classes who are hosting this morning, and many thanks to Dr. Mako and to the Symposium Committee for all of the work that went into this. With that, I invite Dr. Mako forward.
Good morning. So I think most of us are probably familiar with kind of a standard conception of Buddhism. Buddhism is a tradition where people are invited to essentially save themselves through introspection, to meditate and to understand the world, and to achieve release from the bonds of this world through their own efforts. And so the classic and really broadly correct picture of the Buddhist tradition is of monks in seated meditation in monasteries, and indeed this is common throughout Buddhist Asia. Today, though, I want to draw our attention to a different form of Buddhism, one that most people in the United States are not familiar with, which is the tradition of Pureland. Pureland Buddhism is a tradition that may have its roots in India, but it didn't flourish until the tradition reached China and the countries that were then inspired by Chinese Buddhism, Korea and Japan. In Pureland Buddhism, the argument is that this world, the world that we actually live in, is not in fact conducive to enlightenment, that we live short lives and we spend sometimes half our lives learning to become adults, learning to even set forth on a path. And even once we've set forth, we are beset by illness, we are beset by social obligations of various kinds, we are beset by the desires of our body. And then before we make hardly any progress at all in our spiritual lives, then we die. And so the Buddhists who follow this path, rather than saying that we will make these incremental shifts, being reborn over and over again in this world, they say what we need as the solution is to be reborn somewhere better, somewhere that is conducive to the spiritual path. And they call this realm the Pure Land, or the Sukhavati in Sanskrit. The Pure Land is a realm that is separated from our own and is ruled over by a different Buddha. So the Buddha of this world is the man who's supposed to have sat under a tree in India in approximately 500 BC and achieved his enlightenment there. Amitabha is a Buddha in another realm. He's also called Amida. And he rules over this land and can bring devotees to his pure land, especially at the moment of their deaths. He can take people who are devoted to him and bring them to his land where the conditions are right for spiritual growth, where lives are long, bodies are healthy, and external obligations do not press on one in the same way. And so, for many Buddhists in the Pure Land tradition, the goal is not to sit in meditation and achieve one's enlightenment now in this world, but to aspire to a life in a better place, in the Pure Land under Amitabha Buddha. And so the practices of Pure Land Buddhism are not necessarily monastic practices. Instead, they involve centrally calling the name of Amitabha Buddha. And so in Chinese that would be Namo Amitofo, and in Japanese, the Nambutsu, Namo Amida Butsu. And people will say this over and over and over again in the hopes that he will hear them and know that they wish to be pulled into the Pure Land. They can also meditate on the Pure Land itself. And so if they have received a vision of the Pure Land or have been shown an image of the Pure Land, they understand themselves to have some capacity to then find it after their deaths. And so if you know what you're looking for, you can find your own way there, usually with additional help from Amitabha. And finally, Pure Land Buddhism centrally involves the moment of death. So the understanding is that the salvational moment is the moment as you die. If as you die, you can free yourself of fear and think only of Amitabha and call his name and be calm at the moment of your death, then you can be reborn into the Pure Land. So this is a really radically different form of Buddhism, and it's one that is in particular appealing to Asian women in the pre-modern period. Asian women are frequently not in a position to renounce their lives and become nuns. They're often married at very young ages and committed to lives as mothers and grandmothers and housewives. And so a form of Buddhism that opens them up to calling on Amitabha and meditating at the moment of their death was something that was available to them and appealing to them. And so I want to share with you the story of a young Japanese woman named Chujo Hime that I think shows this appeal and the logic of Pureland Buddhism. So in the broadest outlines, the story of Chujo Hime runs this way. Chujo Hime was born to a couple, and when she was 3 years old, her mother fell ill and died. And on her mother's deathbed, the mother was unable to concentrate on the rituals to Amitabha because she was so concerned about her daughter. And so, because she was so concerned about her daughter and saw her chance at the Pure Land slipping away, she cursed Chujo Hime with her dying breaths. And Chujo Hime then endured a basically cursed life. So after her father remarried, young Chujo Hime went through a childhood where she was loathed by her stepmother, and her stepmother conspired to have her father turn against her. She organized sort of a sexual scandal, and Chujo Hime's father sent her out to be executed. But the executioner saves her and goes and raises her on a mountain by herself, and she copies out a sutra describing the Pure Land 1,000 times, and she dedicates the merit to her mother's memory. And so she eventually makes her way to the Taimadera monastery, and she prays repeatedly for a vision of Amitabha. And Amitabha appears to her in the shape of a nun with the Bodhisattva Guanyin, and they show her a vision of the Pure Land, which she weaves into a tapestry. And this is the tapestry that she weaves. Amitabha explains to Chujo Hime that her wish to see Amitabha has been fulfilled, and that by seeing the Pure Land, she will arrive there herself. She is left there, however, for 13 years, and in that time, she is left to teach other people about the Pure Land and to explain her tapestry. And then, when she is 29 years old, Amitabha comes back for her and leads her to the Pure Land in her body, her female body, which she occupied in this life, which is unusual because in a lot of Asian Buddhist traditions, it's understood that you need to be male in order to achieve sort of Buddhist full enlightenment. And so Chujo Hime shows that the structural pressures on women were strong and were real, but the Pure Land opened up ways to essentially envision an alternate world, a world that was better than this world, and a world in which everybody would have access to full spiritual fulfillment. So the reason that I'm sharing this with you is to share the Pure Land core insight, which is that we live in a world where it is difficult, if not impossible, to devote one's full life to spiritual development. And so Pure Land proposes its own vision of what the alternate world would be, but I want to pose to you, for all of us, what kind of world would we need in order to live a fully religious life? What are the ways that the current world presses against us and prevents our spiritual development? And what would we need to open ourselves up more fully? And so that's the invitation for the rest of today's chapel. We're going to have 15 minutes of meditation time, and I ask you to meditate on the conditions of the spiritual life, either that opened up by Pure Land Buddhism or from your own religious tradition. There are 3 options for how I would invite you to engage the space. The first would be to come and sit in the center on a pillow in a more classically Buddhist form of meditation. The second would be to stay in your chair. And the third would be to walk around the space outside of the chairs. We will have music changes approximately every 5 minutes, and I will signal the beginning and the end of the meditation time with a meditation bell. But so as the music shifts, I ask you to choose a different form of meditation. We have a few different options. You can engage in silent, non-visual meditation. You could pray. You could devise a picture in your own mind of what the Pure Land would look like for you, the world in which your spiritual development was truly possible to its fullest extent. And you may also contemplate the Asian images of the Pure Land and of the Buddha Amitabha that we have provided for you. Amitabha being the salvational figure that leads you to the Pure Land. So the image projected behind me is the Taima tapestry woven by Chujo Hime, and we have a few other reproductions of the same tapestry. We also have a number of images of mandalas and of Amitabha for you to engage a little bit more fully with this tradition. Each image has a brief explanation or set of instructions on something specific that you might look at behind the easel, but I invite you to think of this not as a museum piece where you go and learn information, but where the primary purpose is to engage the image itself, and only secondarily to receive instructions on how to look at it. So, just to review, 3 options: seated meditation in pillows, seated meditation in chairs, walking meditation, and or walking contemplation of images. And you'll have the option to do 3 different things as the music changes. So, ready? So we are ready now to go forth from this place. And as we go forth, I invite you to continue in your reflections, not only to keep asking the ways in which your life as it is now is limited from its spiritual possibilities, but maybe also if there are things that you can do to pull your Pureland closer to the life that you actually live. Thank you for coming today.